Welcome back to CIA Declassified. Inside the windowless lead-lined laboratories of the late 1950s, the air feels thick, ionized by forces you cannot see but can certainly feel as a sharp metallic tang on the back of your tongue. You are standing in a high-security research wing at a major American university, funded by a front organization with a name so bland it's forgettable. The era is one of atoms for peace, but in this room, the atom is being prepared for war. Not against cities, but against the resilient structures of the human personality. You find yourself holding your breath, as if the very oxygen might be carrying the invisible seeds of decay. The room is washed in the unforgiving glare of overhead lights that hum with the persistent low-frequency vibration you can feel in your molars. Your eyes trace the thick serpentine cables snaking across the linoleum floor, leading toward a heavy containment vessel that pulses with a silent, unseen heat. There is no wind here, yet the fine hairs on your arms stand straight up, reacting to the massive static charge building in the equipment. You are standing in a pocket of reality where the fundamental laws of biology are being renegotiated by men in white coats. Through the foot-thick leaded glass, you watch the subject. They are sitting in a chair that looks like it belongs in a dentist's office, but the treatment being administered is coming from a rotating gantry overhead. You notice a small bluish spark jump from a metal rail, a Chunrin Cove glow, ghosting in the periphery of your vision, and you realize that the silence in this room is a lie. It is a roar of subatomic activity, a blizzard of gamma rays shredding the cellular integrity of the person on the other side. The researchers check their clipboards with a chilling bureaucratic indifference, treating the onset of radiological nausea as a simple data point on a graph of human compliance. You are the observer now. You aren't just looking at a scientific experiment, you are looking at the erasure of the individual. You feel the crushing weight of the secrecy, the knowledge that if these walls could talk, they would scream with the frequency of a gamma burst. This is MKCOBALT. The atmosphere is one of cold mathematical cruelty where the human body is treated as a biological sensor to be calibrated. You walk out into the cool evening air, but the sun feels different now. You know that the same light that gives life can be harnessed in a basement to take away everything that makes you you. Why MKCOBALT? Within the technical services staff of the CIA, the MK diagraph designated a project under the umbrella of mind control research, while cobalt was a reference to cobalt-60. This is a highly radioactive isotope that produces intense gamma rays. It was the primary tool used in these experiments because of its ability to deliver consistent, penetrating radiation doses to biological tissue. Unlike other projects that used found names, MKCOBALT was a literal designation for the radiological weaponization of the mind. To document the science of atomic coercion, we must look at the declassified breadcrumbs of the MKCOBALT program. MKCOBALT was a research project under the Office of Scientific Intelligence. The program focused on the behavioral effects of ionizing radiation. It utilized radioactive isotopes to induce radiological malaise in subjects. Researchers tracked the loss of will to resist following acute radiation exposure. The program examined the use of radioactive tracers to map the drug-mind interaction. MKCOBALT explored radiological tagging, marking individuals with isotopes for long-term tracking. It utilized gamma ray sources to test the limits of human cognitive endurance. The program studied the synergistic effects of radiation combined with sleep deprivation. MKCOBALT researchers examined if radiation could prime a brain for hypnotic suggestion. The project documented the nausea and disorientation thresholds of human targets. It utilized radioactive aerosols to test the feasibility of covertly dosing a room. The program investigated lethal versus sublethal behavioral modification doses. MKCOBALT was part of the broader MK Ultra search for interrogation tools. Researchers noted that radiation-induced fear was a potent interrogation accelerator. The program explored the use of beta emitters in topical applications to cause localized pain. It monitored the brainwave alterations in animals exposed to high-intensity radiation. MKCOBALT investigated the use of radiation to destroy specific memory centers in the brain. The project cooperated with the Atomic Energy Commission. It explored radiological assassination methods that mimicked natural illnesses. Researchers tracked the long-term psychological decay of exposed subjects. The program utilized shielding experiments to see if a subject could detect the presence of a source. MKCOBALT studied the placebo effect of telling a subject they had been irradiated. It investigated isotopic signatures in human sweat and hair following dosing. The program experimented with radiological barriers to prevent unauthorized entry. MKCOBALT was officially terminated following the 1970s congressional investigations into CIA abuses. The program tested radiological sabotage of an enemy's food and water supplies. It examined the use of neutron activation to identify the origin of foreign-made components. MKCOBALT researchers mapped the central nervous system syndrome associated with high doses. The program looked for ways to make radiation sickness appear like a common cold initially. It utilized X-ray microbeams to target microscopic clusters of neurons. MKCOBALT explored biological dosimetry using chromosomal damage as a gauge. The program investigated the psychosomatic response to radiation warnings. Researchers tested the duration of incapacitation following a burst dose. It explored the radiological sterilization of an individual's environment. MKCOBALT investigated if radiation could cause permanent personality shifts. The program examined remote delivery of isotopes using specialized dart guns. It documented the aversion therapy potential of radiation-induced illness. Researchers looked for radioprotective drugs to keep agency interrogators safe during dosing. The program tested the sensory deprivation effects of radiation on the optic nerve. MKCOBALT mapped the metabolic rate change in subjects under atomic stress. It explored radiological hypnosis via induced brain fog. The program investigated isotopic ink for invisible radioactive communication. Researchers analyzed the gait alterations of irradiated subjects. It examined the radiological vulnerability of different ethnic and genetic groups. MKCOBALT looked at the dream patterns of subjects in high radiation environments. They investigated the decay rate of suggestibility as radiation symptoms cleared. It tested radiological decoys to confuse foreign counter-surveillance. Researchers mapped the adrenaline spike associated with the first detection of radiation. The program explored radiological conditioning to create Pavlovian responses. It investigated the intergenerational effects of behavioral isotopes. MKCOBALT used Geiger counter audio as a psychological torture tool. The program explored radiological cloaking to hide isotopes from standard detectors. Researchers documented visual hallucinations caused by radiation hitting the retina. It investigated the atomic signature of different interrogation techniques. MKCOBALT was used to develop radiological defense training for U.S. diplomats. A quote from a declassified progress report dated 1961, "The use of ionizing radiation offers a unique opportunity to bypass the subject's conscious defenses." Quote from a declassified technical services memo, "We are looking for a physiological whip that can be applied with total deniability." A quote from a declassified scientific review of behavioral radiation, "The subject's orientation to reality is significantly degraded following a calculated dose of cobalt-60. A quote that is declassified remarks of an agency research consultant. That's how it's written, but there's no name. "In the atomic age, the mind is simply another biological system to be controlled through physics." Quote from a declassified CIA analysis of radiological coercion, radiation sickness is the perfect interrogation environment. The body becomes its own prisoner. Quote from a declassified 1964 program overview, we must master the invisible whip before the adversary does. And a quote from a declassified technical directive on isotopic research, the goal is not to kill, but to create a state of total biological helplessness. End quote. Within the clinical outcomes and subject disposition files of MKCOBALT, there is a sub-file titled Long-Term Cognitive Erasure. Approximately 90 pages are completely blacked out. These redactions are protected under Exemption B1 for national defense. I suspect these pages contain the fatal dose protocols, the specific experiments where radiation was used not to modify behavior but to completely and permanently wipe a subject's memory and identity, effectively turning them into a blank slate. I think these redactions also hide the institutional testing logs, the list of prisons and hospitals where these experiments were conducted on unwitting American citizens. The missing text likely details the point of no return for brain tissue death in subjects who proved uncooperative. And I'm not the only one with theories. When you weaponize the atom against the mind, the rumors become as toxic as the isotopes, which is really unfortunate because, as most of you know, I'm a huge supporter of nuclear power, baby. Anyway, some people think the Manchurian Candidate conspiracy applies. They speculate that MKCOBALT successfully created radiological sleepers, operatives whose programming is triggered by exposure to a specific low-level radioactive frequency that only they can sense. Then there's the cancer assassin speculation. It's a persistent one that claims the agency has a library of isotopes designed to cause specific fast-acting cancers already in stage 4, which can be used against political dissidents, making the death appear entirely natural and extremely fast-acting. Then there's the global frequency theory. Some believe MKCOBALT research led to the installation of radiological emitters in major city infrastructure used to maintain a low-level compliance frequency across the general population. And then there's the soul binding theory. It's a fringe one which suggests that researchers believed radiation could trap a consciousness within the body after death, allowing for post-mortem interrogation of high-value targets. Was MKCOBALT a success? Tactically, it was a terrifyingly effective silent tool. The program proved that radiation could be used to induce a state of learned helplessness that was far more profound than that which they achieved by drugs alone. It allowed for the creation of an interrogation environment where the victim had no way to fight back against the source of their pain. It provided the agency with a method of deniable coercion, a way to break the subject while leaving no physical evidence that would stand up in a court of law or an international tribunal. It turned the very cells of the target into the instruments of their own betrayal. Furthermore, the tactical success of MKCOBALT lay in its long-distance influence capabilities. By dosing an environment rather than a person, the agency could destabilize entire groups without ever making direct contact. This tactical breakthrough meant that an embassy or a safe house could be turned into a zone of compliance simply by hiding a cobalt source in the walls. In the tactical arena, MKCOBALT was the ultimate invisible hand, a weapon that operated in a spectrum that the human senses were never designed to detect. Strategically, it was a moral and operational disaster. While the science was sound, the ethical violations and the risk of exposure far outweighed the intelligence gained. The program contributed to the massive institutional paranoia that gripped the agency in the 1970s, leading to a loss of public trust that has never truly been recovered. It proved that in the quest for total control, the state could easily become more monstrous than the enemies it sought to defeat. The program was a dead end. It created a weapon that was too horrific to be used openly and too dangerous to be kept in the shadows. The legacy of MKCOBALT is a warning about the atomic temptation. It showed that when science is decoupled from ethics, the most advanced technology will always be used to attack the most fundamental human rights. The program's strategic failure was its inability to see that a radioactive mind is not a conquered mind, it's a broken one. The data gathered, while technically successful, led the agency down a path of cruelty that ultimately weakened the nation's strategic position by alienating allies and radicalizing adversaries. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, however, it led to so many, such as radiological isotope tracing, which was refined in MKCOBALT. It's used to map drug-mine interactions and is now the gold standard for medical diagnostic imaging. Humanity uses this daily in PET scans to detect cancer and map brain activity, allowing doctors to save lives through early detection. The military applies this to supply chain security using isotopes to trace the origin of black market explosives. The intelligence community uses it to tag high-value items or documents with unique radioactive signatures that can be detected from a distance, ensuring that stolen secrets can be followed through the shadows of the global underworld. Targeted radiation therapy emerged from the X-ray microbeam research designed to destroy memory centers. Today, humanity uses this as a primary weapon in the fight against cancer, using pinpoint radiation to kill tumors while sparing healthy tissue. The military uses this technology to develop active denial systems, non-lethal weapons that use energy beams to disperse crowds without causing permanent harm. The intelligence community uses the science of biological dosimetry pioneered in MKCOBALT to protect operatives in foreign hot zones, ensuring they are shielded from covert radiological attacks. Biometric stress modeling was developed to track the body's reaction to the invisible whip and is now the foundation of modern wearable health tech. For humanity, this breakthrough allows your smartwatch to track your heart rate and stress levels, alerting you to potential health issues before they become emergencies. The military uses this for pilot fatigue monitoring, ensuring that high-performance aviators are not pushed beyond their biological limits. The intelligence community applies it to advanced polygraphy, using subvocal and metabolic markers to identify deception with nearly 100% accuracy, even though the court of law won't allow you to submit polygraph results. Environmental radiological shielding was perfected to protect agency researchers during dosing sessions and is now essential for space exploration and nuclear power safety. Humanity uses these breakthroughs to build the reactors that provide clean energy and the spacecraft that will one day carry us to Mars, protecting humans from the harsh radiation of the cosmos. The military uses this tech to harden command and control centers against EMP attacks. The intelligence community uses it to build SCIFs, sensitive, compartmented information facilities that are impenetrable to electronic and radiological eavesdropping. We live in an age where the atom is no longer a stranger. MKCOBALT was the moment we realized that the power of the sun could be used to burn away the human spirit. It was a project that proved that the most intimate parts of our being, our memories, our will, and our sanity are vulnerable to the cold law of physics. The reality of MKCOBALT is that it turned the quiet professional into a radiological predator. It proved that in the quest for security, there is no boundary the state will not cross and no force of nature it will not weaponize against its own kind. This project established the chilling precedent that the very air we breathe and the light we see can be turned into a whip used to command our obedience. But the most haunting realization of the radioactive mind is that once the invisible whip has been cracked, the silence that follows is never truly empty. We have entered an era where our biological autonomy is no longer a given, but a privilege that must be defended against the silent encroachments of technology. MKCOBALT was not just a Cold War experiment. It was a declaration of war on the sanctity of the human interior. As we move further into a world of cognitive liberty, we must remember the lessons of the lead-lined room, that a mind broken by an atom is a mind that can never truly be mended. We are the inheritors of this radioactive legacy, living in a world where the ghost of Cobalt-60 still whisper in the hallways of power, reminding us that the light of the future can only be bright if it does not burn away who we are. Your mind is a fortress. Don't let the invisible forces in. A secret kept in the heart is safer than one kept in the head. If you feel a metallic taste, it's already too late. And remember, in the radioactive mind, the only thing that decays faster than the isotope is the truth. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we examine Snow Cone, a clandestine communications project involving high-frequency radio burst transmissions. We'll look at the whispering static, the science of the invisible signal, and the reality of a war fought through the cracks in the airwaves. Join us next time for The Silent Burst. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.